Hello, and welcome to this Saturday at 8 in the morning Some Idiot Reads. I'm Cy, and I'm some idiot. And, honestly, the fact that I'm recording this at 8 in the morning is functionally irrelevant, because you're going to be getting this at noon on a Sunday. Actually, this one, probably tomorrow. I'll cover that in a moment. And, for the other one or two that I'm going to record, subsequent Sundays. Something like that. I haven't even had a sip of my coffee yet. Alright, that's step one. So yeah, no, I'm going to keep this short because I want to dive straight into things. But yeah, it's early in the morning on a Saturday because, I don't know, I'm going to give it a try as opposed to recording these in the evening after I get done with my normal day job. Try getting this early on, and I don't know, build up a backlog. Whatever. Anyway, like I said, 8 in the morning is relatively intangible, except unless, you're wondering, man, he looks kind of bleary-eyed. That's correct. I just rolled out of bed like 10 minutes ago. So, but anyway, you're not here to listen to the woeful tale of me climbing my butt out of sleep. You are here for Some Idiot Reads. Or I suppose you're here because you fell asleep at your phone and YouTube is just rolling things along. In which case, cool. Hi, welcome. And thanks to the algorithm for pointing you this way. I hope you enjoy what you hear. Quick status check on everything. The United States is currently in a shit show. And I don't think that needs any additional explanation. However, so my usual run is I would go through... Normally I would post right now my continuing read through of Emma Goldman's Anarchism and Other Essays, and I do intend to have that posted next week. That is my intent. But I'm gonna go ahead and post a second dispatches in a row. One, because these are fantastic and I love them. Two, I feel that with issues being reported as regards to OSHA more recently. Double check with how the news cycle goes here in the U.S. during this administration. Maybe it's changed. But as of February 8th, there's definitely been issues about OSHA being suspended, I believe. I'm trying to remember it accurately. I need more of that delicious bean juice. But as regards people screwing around with OSHA, I felt it was eminently appropriate to put this dispatch up. Well, sorry. I felt it eminently appropriate to do a reading of this dispatch. Because, there's relevancy. Really appreciate that conversation we had on that topic there, Cody. Or, not Cody, Coyote. Jesus Christ, so good. Okay, I'm good. I promise. I can read. I can think. That was an awesome conversation that we had there. Coyote. Monsieur Wallace. Alright, I've been rambling for almost 5 minutes, and that is like 3 minutes longer than I was hoping to. I'm going to go ahead and dive into this, but before we get going, here we go. This is one of Coyote Wallace's dispatches from Appalachia. You can find it on his Medium page. There will be a link in the description. I highly recommend head over there, give him a follow, like right there. Give him a follow. Go through, read it, read any number of his articles. He has got several. And a number of those I've also read on this channel. So if you want to have my dulcet tones regale you with his tales of capitalist horror, drug-fueled shenanigans, or any number of things that are just really awesome, because I don't want to wind up giving things away. Go check out some more that's posted here on the channel for Some Idiot Reads, and go check out his dispatches directly. Give him a tip on his Ko-Fi if you are so inclined, and it won't hurt you to do so. There's going to be links always at the bottom of each article. I will point that out almost certainly, once I get to the end of this one. But what we are going to do... Yeah, okay. Today we are going to be reading through the third, I think, in his Lost Heroes of Hold on. Okay. The third in his Lost Heroes of Old Appalachia series. This is A Shadow Over the Mountains and the Tale of Black Death, number 5. Posted on January 25th, 2025. The Lost Heroes of Old Appalachia, The Shadow Over the Mountain, and the Tale of Black Death, number 5. There is a place where the poplar trees reach toward the sky, and the wind sings a low, mournful song through the evergreen pines. A place where mountains watch over the doings of men, be they sinner or saint, and where, for more than 100 years, brave men and women have struggled just to survive. This is a land where the long-form deed could snatch away a family's home that had been in their name for generations, and where hired killers, deputized by the very government meant to protect them, shot men dead in the streets for asking for fair pay. A land of hunger, hardship, and struggle, but also one of hope, determination, and fearlessness. This is where Devil Anse Hatfield and Randall McCoy set the nation ablaze with tales of their blood feud, and where F.E. Waller-Smith penned Rhymes of the Cumberland at a time when the voices of African Americans were often kept from the page. What follows immediately after here is a colorized photo of the Hatfield clan with Devil Anse Hatfield in the center. Man with a rather impressive beard. And honestly, a terrifying look of a mountain man on his face. I don't know any other way to describe that. Wow. I don't mean that in any bad sense. Like, that's just what my brain patterns that to. These are the communities fought for by Mother Jones, John L. Lewis, and the two-gun saint, Sid Hatfield. Communities sustained by the labors of hard-working immigrants from Ireland, Scotland, Italy, Poland, Wales, Germany, and many more. Communities where the protective and neighborly nature of their people served as a beacon to African Americans fleeing the bitter racism of the North and the South. Communities that endured the bitter times thrust upon them by standing shoulder to shoulder. These are the people who, with their backs against the wall and the whole world set against them, banded together in defiance of the cruel barons of industry. The land where Sesco Estep and Charlie Kemp laid down their lives for their brothers, and where Red Thompson organized a force of 75 black coal miners to rain hellfire down upon the loathsome gun thugs. When those thugs believed that they had broken the UMWA's line, where Sid Hatfield laid low the no-good Albert Phelps and 7 of his men, armed as they were with Thompson submachine guns, using only 2 revolvers. What follows after the words 2 revolvers is a non-colorized picture of a steaming pile of shit in a bow tie. Albert Phelps. We have worn many names, some of them unkind. Hillbilly, Mountain Trash, Tinker Pinks, Hicks, and Redneck. The last, stolen from us by Southerners, has been corrupted into meaning something other than a proud member of the UMWA willing to bleed for his people. We've been your explorers, your frontiersmen, your mountain men, and we have been your warriors for the rights of all working people. And like us, our home has worn many names. The dark and bloody ground, King Coal's kingdom, the Coal Belt, and, from my mother's own lips, Noggy Tuck Nowhere. But to those of us who live here, we know this land by the names taught to us by our grandfathers and theirs before them. We know it by the death that is soaked into the very soil, and by the sacrifices laid at the altar of servitude to the New World nobles who propped themselves up as capitalists at the expense of both decency and humanity. We know the names that make us remove our hats. Bloody Harlan, Bad Breathitt, Breathitt. I'm sorry. Correct me in the comments. Mannington, Monongah, and so many more. Their sacrifices could fill the mountains with graves. In some places, they very well have. What follows is a picture of soldiers dealing with striking miners at Harlan. You may call it Appalachia. I am Coyote Wallace, and this is the Dispatches from Appalachia. And today, we examine the tales of Warren G. Harding's favorite plane, Black Death No. 5. Also, real quick, stepping back out as the reader here, I'm genuinely curious here. This is not like a negative commentary. I'm actually curious. Was Redneck stolen? Like, speaking as a Southerner, was Redneck stolen by Southerners? Or was it, like, is misappropriated the right word? Like, started being assigned to them by other individuals until it was internalized? I genuinely don't know on that one. I'm not particularly attached to that as, you know, a, what's the word I'm looking for? As an appellation, which is, like, as in, not appellation as in the mountains, but appellation as in, like, a term or title. I'm not really attached to it, but I'm actually curious about that. Like, to my reckoning, I guess I've always heard it, again, growing up in the South, redneck just meant effectively backwoods people. And so again, like, that's a curious little point for me. I'm genuinely curious about that. I need to go look that up. Or, like, see if there's been any kind of tracking of that one. I'm really curious. If you have info on it, again, please post in the comments. Boost the algorithm. I love you very much. Thanks. Okay. The Shadow Over the Mountain and the Tale of Black Death No. 5. The year is 1921, and the Appalachian coal miner is embroiled in a bloody, unending battle against the forces of King Coal, the governments of Appalachia, and the murderous thunder of gun thug rifles. Miners are on strike from the near-hidden town of Wheelwright to the freshly paved streets of Mattawan. With a force of over 10,000 men and women, they have begun their march on Charleston, West Virginia, the very beating heart of the coal industry. They carry not only signs of protest, but also the very weapons that the coal barons once turned against them. These miners, many veterans of the Great War, have organized themselves into regiments, with officers, ranks, and columns, reflecting the discipline and experience they brought home from the trenches. What follows is a picture of miners beginning to gather for the march. Blood has been spilled. The Coal Operators Association, hereafter referred to as King Coal, is eager to force their human cogs back into the mines. To achieve this, they are willing to kill, torture, rape, maim, and terrorize as they see fit. King Coal has bought the judges, corrupted the law, rewritten the records of its own atrocities, and turned merely wicked men into villains of legend. Those villains wielded their violence without restraint, But the people of Appalachia have answered back with fire and fierce resistance, drawing strength from the mountains themselves. Sheriff Don Chafin had, just weeks prior, ordered his men to disperse a protest led by the wives of miners by firing into the crowd in the town of Sharples. Only the dead and injured were left in its wake. For this crime, the Appalachian coal miners had decided that, as the law would not touch him, they would hang him themselves. It would be their declaration that the era of gun thug rule in Appalachia was over. What follows is a different pile of shit, this time wearing a hat. Sheriff Don Chafin's. Sid Hatfield lay dead, murdered by the labor spy Charles Lively, on the courthouse steps, even as his wife pleaded with the killers to at least spare his face so that those who loved him might look upon him in death. Mother Jones had fled the region, her calls for peaceful resistance now drowned out by the roar of escalating violence. Sesco Estep lay in his freshly dug grave, and the dam that had held back the rising flood of resistance since 1860 had finally broken. President Warren G. Harding, godless son of a bitch that he was, had thrown his support behind the coal barons. He sold the American people on the idea that the Appalachian coal miners were saboteurs, undermining America's great expansion into the industrial age. Misguided patriotism, fueled by lies, led the nation to believe the miners were socialist monsters bent on tearing apart the very fabric of the country. Without coal to fuel the trains, factories, and great machines of industry, Harding claimed, all of America would suffer. Coal had to be dug, and it would be dug, at any cost. Quick step aside as well. Pay attention to the words being spoken here and the history being expressed, because there's similarities going on. Two faces now faced each other in the Logan line, both spoiling for a fight. Oppressors met those they had oppressed in open, bloody conflict. The Battle of Blair Mountain had begun. The tools of the devil's trade. King Coal's American noblemen huddled in their fine homes, cowering behind armed guards, as the torches of marching coal miners lit up the Appalachian night, like 10,000 fireflies burning back the darkness. These miners were veterans, mountain men, preachers, teachers, souls forged by hardship on foreign shores and at home. They armed themselves with stolen weapons, looted from hijacked military trains, and carried the fire of rebellion stoked in Mattawan, where Sid Hatfield, the miners' saint, had struck down Albert Phelps and his corrupt detectives. The only thing standing between the miners and the industrial barons was Sheriff Don Chafin, a name still spoken with spits and curses, uttered in the same hateful breath as J.H. Blair and Charles Lively. The Coal Operators Association believed Chafin to be the only man with the grit, cruelty, and iron will to break the miners and force them back into the depths of the earth. In 1919, Chafin was paid $31,000 for his services, a king's ransom, and was held in the highest regard by the coal industry and the government of West Virginia. What follows is Don Chafin's gun on display at the Coal War Museum with a quote, "Kill all the rednecks you can," which is what he apparently said to his men during the battle. Chafin loved nothing but the money lining his pockets, and his forces were backed by the full might of not only King Coal, but also the United States government. Where the miners bore stolen Lee Enfield rifles, shotguns, dynamite, pilfered military helmets, and sidearms, Chafin's men were outfitted with the very best that money could buy. Chafin himself was famously fond of the Thompson submachine gun, a gift from the governor of West Virginia. That very gun hangs in a museum today, near one of Sid Hatfield's revolvers. What follows is a weapons stockpile at Logan, West Virginia, of miniguns all just like set together in little piles. The Thompson submachine gun was a marvel of modern firearm technology. A blowback-operated, selective fire weapon invented by Brigadier General John T. Thompson just 3 years prior. Chaffin's Thompsons could unleash a hellstorm of 900 rounds per minute. In the hands of a skilled operator, the .45 caliber Thompson could deal death as smoothly as a paintbrush gliding over a wooden fence. Among Chaffin's men, Winchester repeating rifles and Lee Enfield bolt-action rifles were also the standard, many of the same models carried by the miners themselves. Sharpshooters and snipers would play pivotal roles in the Coal War. For Chaffin's gun thugs, such weapons were tools of oppression, honed through countless acts of brutality against men. For the miners, the rifles were survival tools, better suited for hunting squirrels to feed their families than for war. At key positions along the Logan County border, Chaffin ordered the placement of Lewis machine guns and Colt Browning M1895 potato diggers. These were battlefield weapons of the Great War, monstrous instruments of slaughter capable of breaking an enemy's will to fight through sheer devastation. The Lewis gun, an American invention used primarily by the British Army in World War I, was a particularly vicious weapon. It fired .30-06 Springfield rounds at 600 rounds per minute, with a muzzle velocity exceeding 2,400 feet per second. Its effective range was 880 yards, but its round remained lethal for up to 3,500 yards. For a man like Chaffin, the stray bullets and collateral damage were of no concern. And what follows is a picture of a Lewis gun with this chunky boy barrel. The Colt Browning M1895 was no less lethal. Nicknamed Potato Digger for its distinct gas-operated mechanism, the M1985 churned out 450 rounds per minute. Air-cooled, belt-fed, and designed with brutal efficiency, it fired the same .30-06 Springfield rounds as the Lewis gun, and would remain in use around the world for years to come. And what follows after is a picture of the Colt Browning M1895. Word was sent to the miners: turn back or face annihilation. Chaffin vowed to slaughter every redneck who approached Logan. Yet he promised that any man willing to throw down his red handkerchief, renounce the UMWA, and return to the miners would be pardoned for his transgressions. The newspapers claimed the miners numbered 10,000 strong. Chaffin, however, swore that the numbers were even greater, swelling instead of shrinking under his threats. Believe what you will. For the Appalachian people, immigrant and native-born, black and white, Catholic, Baptist, or Jewish, there was no turning back. Together, they marched toward Logan. Our people had spent generation upon generation digging King Coal's fortunes out of these mountains. We toiled in conditions where death wasn't a possibility, it was an eventual certainty. They took our babies, little more than toddlers, and put them to work in the choking dust that filled our lungs, turning them into pit ponies for their insatiable greed. The gun thugs, with tin stars slapped on their chests by the very officials meant to protect us, beat and raped our women, threw families from their homes, and riddled our tent cities with bullets while our wounded and children shivered in the cold. Don Chaffin had the audacity to think the Appalachian people would bow to something as paltry as death, when death had been our constant companion. Coal dust, hunger, and the slow decay of a king's servant were all we'd ever known. He waited for the coal miners and their people, my people, at the base of Blair Mountain, in the little town of Logan, with all of his guns and all of his purchased might. To him, we were mountain trash, fit only to be broken under his boot. If I may cast aside my proper English for a moment, I say you, that man was but a wicked fool, a wicked and dangerous fool. And so, the Battle of Blair Mountain began. Also, I sincerely hope that I phrased that correctly. Um, Again, being a Southern boy, there's certain related patois, but I don't think I could appropriately capture the the regional usage. Solidarity against the devil himself. There's much that may be written about about the Battle of Blair Mountain, and the stories of that conflict still echo in these hills. This was the largest armed uprising of American citizens outside of the Civil War, not united by a wicked and spiteful practice like slavery, but bound together by the understanding that they were all brothers in the Union. Here, those who came to America seeking better fortunes, only to find inflicted hardship, banded together with lifelong Appalachians who had watched their fathers, brothers, and children work themselves to death. Black men stood shoulder to shoulder with white men as they marched forward toward the guns, and every man there had seen the light that only exists at the bottom of a coal mine. We're all the same when we're underground. I cannot, in this piece dedicated merely to Bomber Number 5, do proper justice to the bravery, courage, and violence that such a day brought forth on this earth. Some may argue that God turned his face away from Appalachia when Don Chafin opened fire from the mountainside, where his machine gun nests were deployed, and the miners faced attack from both the front and the flanks. But I refuse, on principle, to cite the number of dead coal miners provided by the men who killed them. These are the same people who told us black lung wasn't real, even as they bought off doctors and judges to reinforce their lies. They do not get to count us. Be we dead or alive, they do not get to make us their trophies, or hide their shame amidst our corpses. As the miners sought cover, desperate to escape the hellish fire, one thing we do know is this. It was Eli Kemp, a young black miner, who was shot down first, dying at Red Thompson's feet. We know this, as the white miners found themselves pinned by the overwhelming rate of fire raining down on them. It was Red Thompson, his work boots likely stained with Eli Kemp's blood, who turned the 75 black Appalachian miners who stood with him that day. He would have looked upon their faces and seen the fear that machine guns inspired. He would have heard, over the cacophony of gunfire, the sounds of men being torn apart by weapons meant for the enemies of a nation. Red Thompson was just one man, as Sid Hatfield had been one man, and as Cisco Estep had been one man. And on that day, Red must have known that no single man could ever stand alone against such a loathsome corruption and hate. But he wasn't alone. Red Thompson, a black miner who had made his home in the hills of Appalachia, who had traveled the long road to solidarity, and who believed in the cause of the United Mine Workers of America, turned to his comrades. Those men, their numbers scarred by the bite of racism, inequality, and the bitter taste of broken promises, stood ready. What follows is a picture of the Lorraine Coal Dock Company. Do you know what he said? And this, for the record, is why we live in Appalachia. Is why we in Appalachia, who remember our heritage, know that we are not Southerners and never shall be. Up the mountain, boys. Up the mountain, or the day is lost. They did not hesitate. These men, who endured the cruelest aspects of the American dream turned nightmare, did not pause to consider their differences or the walls the rich men had tried to build between them. No. These men, red bandanas tied around their necks, for they were rednecks in the old and true sense of the word, Take that, Johnny Reb. Charged up that mountain as machine guns tore through the trees around them. As they charged, the main line of the UMWA's forces held firm against the withering fire from the front. Is it becoming clear what happened yet? The air would have been thick with gun smoke, stinging the eyes and burning the lungs. The sound of death's song rang out from the mouths of men, dying men, as surely as blood spilled from their wounds. Fire leapt from the barrels of tools of war. Red Thompson and his men took that machine gun nest. The UMWA forces held their line against the superior firepower of Don Chafin and his band of murderers, thieves, and gutless cowards with no repute or standing. By the time the first day drew to a close and the fighting had spread across and the fighting had spread across Blair Mountain, with the Union forces taking the mountain and making it their own, Don Chafin knew in his black heart that even with all the guns in West Virginia, he didn't have the sand to take it. He understood that if he tried, he would be defeated. The miners knew the land far better than him, and in the dark forests of the Appalachian hills, his forces would be overwhelmed time and again, a fact later borne out by bitter proof. Do you know why they don't teach you about the Battle of Blair Mountain? Because it's where the UMWA knocked the devil himself on his ass and told him all the demons in hell that escaped to Washington, you come and take our mountain. As vexed as Don Chafin was, a murderous frenzy of rage by all accounts, his anger was but a pale shadow compared to that of even more powerful figure. The miners were never supposed to keep fighting. Promises had been made that once force was used against them, they would break, would go back to work. The great beast of American industry relied upon black coal that the miners dug, and without it, that beast would soon begin to starve. Warren G. Harding cast his eye upon us and decided that America would kill us before it granted us freedom. He would have his work cut out for him. What follows is a pile of shit that got to use the presidential seal, Warren G. Harding. Bombs, gas, and the wrath of the Almighty. Harding, deeply displeased with the conflict and growing more agitated with each passing day, was fit to be tied. The coal miners were proving far more adept at guerrilla warfare than anyone had anticipated. Many of the gun thugs and hired killers sent into the fray were men from urban centers or western territories, and when they ventured into the mountains looking for coal miners to kill, they often became easy prey. After all, these were men squaring off against a people who had spent their lives with squirrel rifles in hand, navigating the unforgiving terrain of the Appalachians. Brutality was the language of the gun thug, but we had known the gun thug for so long that we spoke this language fluently. Yet it wasn't just skill with a blade or a gun that kept the Appalachian people in the fight. Doctors and those with moral objections to killing took up the task of tending the wounded. Wives and children made bandages, prepared food, and crafted herbal remedies to stretch the dwindling resources. We raided company stores, dynamited bridges, seized rail cars, and outright robbed those who supported the enemy to sustain our fight. The weapon we wielded they could never match, and one that could never be bought with gold or greenbacks, was solidarity. But, thanks to President Harding, the forces of King Cole would soon possess a weapon that was beyond the reach of our rifles, and capable of devastation the UMWA miners could not have foreseen. We are the children of the mountains, born in the shadow of their vast, dark shade, and often consigned to a short life beneath their crushing weight. The coal is in our blood, and the wilderness is to us what water is to fish. That is why Warren G. Harding gave the gun thugs the sky. 3 biplanes, one of them a night bomber, were brought to Kanawha County by the U.S. Army. Along with a complement of pilots, the planes arrived with all the crews and equipment necessary for their maintenance and operation. 2 smaller biplanes were tasked with dropping mustard and tear gas, while the night bomber, armed with 2,000 pounds of high explosives, was intended to turn the forests of West Virginia into splinters of deadly shrapnel. The night bomber, officially designated Bomber Number 5, soon earned the grim nickname the Black Death for its distinctive dark coloring, meant to help it blend into the night skies. In war, such designs made it harder for anti-aircraft guns to target their prey. Follows is a picture of ordnance being loaded onto the Black Death Number 5. When used against civilians, it's simply so you can kill them in their sleep, under cover of darkness, before they know where the death is coming from. We will never truly know how many lives were taken by gas or by bomb. Some say a few hundred, others say a few thousand. I will not describe for you the agony that mustard gas inflicts upon the lungs, nor will I detail what happens when 2,000 pounds of explosives detonate in the dense woods of Appalachia, a reality the pilots and bombers must have known full well as they carried out the devil's work. Again and again they bombed us. Again and again they gassed us. There was no reprieve. There was no defense. The will of the UMWA grew thin as the sky cried fire and the mountains shook under the fury of men too cowardly to fight us face to face. Instead, they waged their war from out of reach. We had no weapons to bring down Black Death Number 5, though the miners certainly tried. Warren Harding's airborne attack hawk was beyond our grasp. Surrender seemed inevitable. Follows is a picture of a recovered poison gas canister that was dropped on coal miners. On September 3rd, 1921, the biplanes in Bomber Number 5 had already made 2 attack runs on positions believed to be held by the miners. Toxic gas, smoke, and ash drifted up from the trees, marking the path of destruction left in the pilot's wake. The UMWA forces were so close to defeat that the bomber had to return to base to refuel and rearm, ready to press its advantage and deliver victory to the forces of industry over the forces of working men. The miners watched, powerless but resolute, prepared to die rather than surrender to the gun thugs as Black Death Number 5 appeared once more on the horizon. Heavy with fuel and fresh bombs, the shadowy crucifix of the bomber loomed ever closer. It is as sure as I am sitting here that the miners knew if the Black Death's dark shadow fell upon them, they would soon meet their maker. What happened next has all the qualities of myth, legend, and tales of divine providence. I cannot say whether I believe in such things, but on that day, it was not just the men and women of Appalachia who stood with the UMWA's cause. As the story goes, the Lord Almighty himself had grown weary of the atrocities inflicted upon the coal miners, and when he saw what King Cole and Don Chaffins had wrought, there was but one answer. As it turned out, the Almighty had the same answer for the gun thugs that Sid Hatfield had. The men on the mountain that day swear a lightning bolt arced from the gathering clouds, though no rain or other sign of a storm had been reported, and struck Black Death Number 5, sending the bomber hurtling toward the earth in a fiery spiral. The crew, who had been raining death upon the heads of coal miners and their families, were either killed instantly or burned alive in the inferno that followed. They would never live to spend the blood money they had earned in exchange for our lives, and Black Death Number 5 would never again cast its foul shadow over the mountains of Appalachia. The bomber crashed in the forest near Lockwood, West Virginia. Its destruction proved to be more than just a moment of reprieve for the miners. As word spread of the crash, the 2 remaining planes were recalled. Warren G. Harding may have been willing to risk using bombers against miners, but the loss of a plane loaded with its deadly payload was a catastrophe no one could ignore. The public, already uneasy about the use of such technology against civilians, now had fuel for their outrage. the tide of opinion began to turn, and the bombers were grounded for good. Once again, the miners had escaped the combined might of the United States government and King Cole, who had sought to crush their union. Warren G. Harding's attack hawk had its wings clipped, and the destruction of Black Death No. 5 became a symbol of divine justice to the miners. To them, it was a sign that the Lord himself had taken their side. But there were fights to be fought, blood to be spilled, and dignity to be reclaimed. But in Appalachia, at least, the skies were clear once more. Solidarity forever. And that is the end of that one. God, I love the series of these that I've gone through. First and foremost, quick clap, because that is warranted. And I mean, let me clarify on that. I don't love hearing tales of capitalist fucking atrocities. That's fucking garbage. That's also very relevant, he says, staring pointedly into the camera. But I love hearing these stories of resistance that I feel, honestly, is lost history. I mean, the title of it, as Lost Heroes of Appalachia, of old Appalachia, is apt. Prior to interacting with Coyote and reading any of these, this was nothing I had any awareness of. I'll be perfectly honest, though it shames me to say so. I think I might have mentioned I'd heard something about a coal war prior. And I consider that one part failing of an education system, trying to whitewash atrocities, he says, staring pointedly at the camera, at America today, at the GOP, you racist fucking bigots. Whitewashing of history. It is a thing that occurs, and there were atrocities that happened. I try and give myself a little bit of grace in that lack of awareness, simply because there's so much history that's out there and so many atrocities committed that we have simply lost or are only regionally known. That's not a good thing at all, but I recognize it is a thing if I'm trying to give myself a little bit of grace in my ignorance of these things. But that ignorance is combated by articles like this, by the research and the work, the labor that Coyote puts into this. He and individuals like him. So as long as he permits it, and as long as my voice carries out, I will continue to read these things, especially the Lost Heroes of Old Appalachia. Those are good ones to bring up. There's still several more dispatches. I know that he released one, actually, literally, was it yesterday? No, it's 2 days ago, relating to the history, origin, and importance of music to the Appalachian struggle. That was actually a really, from what he was saying about it, that was one that started to get a lot of scope creep, is what I understood. Like, it kept blossoming bigger and bigger, but was a fascinating thing for him to write. Highly recommend. Go check that one out. And again, said it earlier at the top, back on down the article. If you do read any of his articles, again, I highly recommend go and do it yourself. Give it a read. Also, go read his book, American Mystic, The Life, Death, and Rebirth of Jimmy Wonderful. It's available on Amazon, and it's a fantastic read from Nightmare Press. It's awesome. Buy a copy. Throw it at a fascist. I guess keep it and read it too. Buy 2 copies. Throw one at a fascist and keep the other one and read it. Buy 3 copies. Give one to a local library. Buy 4 copies. Give one to a not local library. There's my plug for it. I'm not paid for that. I honestly just love the guy's work. Seriously, buy yourself a copy, though. It's amazing. American Mystic, The Life, Death, and Rebirth of Jimmy Wonderful. Anyway, so yeah. Right here on the page. Yep. This will go, I believe, to his Ko-Fi, where you can also give him a direct tip if you enjoy the writing of this writer. This self-described writer, humorist, professional degenerate, and possibly 3 coyotes doing a very bad impersonation of a human being. And that will do it for this one. I'm going to get myself some water and take a few hits off my vape before I dive on into the next one. You guys take care. This has been Some Idiot Reads, and I'm Some Idiot. Deuces. Where's my stop recording button? Oh, God. No.